This is what my Mando kit looks like right now. I had to rush the paint job and, well, I learned my lesson. I ended up with this piece of garbage. Avela and I have been asked to do an event in our Mando kits 4 weeks from today. That's not a lot of time at all.
Yeah, this is gonna have to be sanded.
We need to start working ASAP. There's no time to waste. To remove all the failed layers, I sanded it down with 60 and 100 grit sandpaper. Honestly, it looked kind of cool, especially the helmet.
Feels good to wear armor. Alright, so now we're gonna put a new base coat on everything.
The temperature in the room ended up being a major problem. We had prepared the painting room and tried to fight the cold by putting the spray cans in a bucket of warm water before starting painting the first layer, which was the primer. The next day we checked the armor and it looked like this. Our painting room is in the basement and it gets pretty cold there in winter. Too cold for spray painting, it seems. The initial reason for why we started to rush the process was because summer was ending and it's not recommended to use spray paint in cold temperatures or indoors. And turns out the basement was just under the temperature that you can spray paint in. It was 9 degrees and anything under 10 is not recommended. Essentially painting and putting the pieces to dry in the fridge. That's what led to the surface of the paint to crack. So we had to figure out a method to heat up the room, otherwise this operation would be over. We went to Modonet with Avela's dad to get an extra heat radiator and insulation. Then we set everything up in the painting room. I had to sand some of the pieces again that had the cracked surface, then add some more primer again and hope this time it will dry well.
Okay, so it seems like the isolation and the heating were a success because the paint looks good.
This whole bump in the road took almost an entire week of our timetable, so it was looking even more tight with our schedule. 3 weeks until it needs to be done. Chrome needs a week to dry and everything needs to dry properly before weathering. No more time for setbacks. So the next day, everything except the gauntlets got the black layer. I did 2 thin layers instead of 1 thick one to avoid the paint dripping. After another extra day of drying, the chrome layer went on. The black was just put underneath to make the chrome look better. Some of the chrome pieces that didn't get ruined during the first paint job got a second layer of chrome. Chrome needed to rest for a week until we would start masking with tape. In the meantime, we started making the rope belt. We had bought some white rope and brown dye, so we put it into hot water and stirred for an hour, but once we started rinsing everything came off. Turns out we tried to color polyester, which is synthetic and is nearly impossible to dye like this. So we went back to the store and got some cotton rope and more dye. We also got a bigger pot from a thrift shop that could be sacrificed as a dyeing pot. So we boiled the water, chugged some salt in there, and then the dye and rope. We kept it in there for an hour again, and this time when rinsing it, it looked like the color stayed. To make the rest of it, I just sewed together the ropes to each other. So next I'm going to be attaching the buckles to the belt. After that was done, the belt was ready. The rope or girth belt turned out quite good. The techniques I used are definitely not pro, but it feels pretty sturdy and looks the part. Also, the Velcro ends make slight adjustments possible. Another thing that was done while the chrome was drying was to assemble the blasters. I got some really nice Wester 34s from Watto's junkyard. I watched a tutorial to assemble them. They feel real and look really cool. Then we could continue with the paint job. I masked out the areas that will stay chrome. Then add mustard. Once again, paint 2 thin layers of paint, and once the paint is touch dry, remove the masking tape. This was done for the main blue, black, and secondary blue on the visor. We waited at least 2 days between every layer, but when doing the black layer, the blue underneath ripped pretty badly in some spots. On the chest it looked okay, but on the helmet it was a bit too much, so we needed to figure out how to fix it. Then we ran into some problems with the spray cans. We had 2 blues, but both were not spraying. They were clogged at the tip of the can. At this point, we were already thinking this might actually be the end of it. With 4 days left until the event, there was not enough time to get more paint. Luckily, it was fixable by sticking a pointy tip into the bottle cap and we could spray. While it was drying, I fixed the holster straps, which were too short.
I'm going to get replacements from the guy that I bought it on Etsy, but unfortunately they're not here yet, and I mean I'm gonna need to wear this for the event, so I'm gonna make a makeshift solution and make an extension to make it work.
So I made straps out of leather, cut them out and punched holes in them. Not visually pleasing, but it should work.
So today, the actual extensions arrived.
Anyway, back to painting. The tape removed some of that other blue. The reason for the tape removing the underlayer was the settling dust that, if not removed properly before applying the next layer, well, you know what happens. Yet another thing you don't have to worry about if you're painting outside. I removed the blue layer a little bit so that the chrome would be visible. At this point, there was no time left to do any more painting and we had to get creative and use it as weathering instead. At this point, everything was painted and it was time to see if the chipping effect looked good or not. So I removed the mustard.
So far so good.
It took a while, but once all the mustard was removed, it looked great and it was time to weather. With 2 days left to finish the build, time was running out, but there was a lot to do. First, all the armor got additional physical weathering in the form of sanding with sandpaper.
Yeah, I think that's quite good. We're still in the race. Let's go!
After the black wash was added, the pieces of the gauntlets also had to be glued together.
Alright, so now we're gluing the gauntlets and we are using 2 different kinds of glue.
E6000 glue was used for a stronger bond, super glue to help some pieces stay in place while curing. The weathering was finished by adding powder and a matte top coat.
Last minute shopping. Alright, so now it's time to glue the straps.
Elastic bands that we bought were used to hold the shoe armor in place. This piece won't be under much tension, so super glue would probably have been enough, but E6000 was added so that it would stay in place for sure.
Alright, so here we have the tubes for the flamethrower, and right now we're just working on how to attach the tubes to the vest.
After marking the position of where the tubes would be attached, the tubes were cut to the correct length and then sewn together. It was really tough and gloves had to be used. After that, the snaps needed to be sewn onto the tubes, which was not easy. Then snaps were sewn onto the vest. And then, it was time for the event.
We didn't have time to test anything, so the big reveal will be when it's go time, but yeah, now it's time to pack, so.
When suiting up for the first time, there was a small issue with not being able to close the holster strap, so some tools had to be used. But otherwise, suiting up went easy and we were ready for the grand reveal. But before that, I think you should blast that like button. Alright, so that was pretty cool. Now, if you want to see how we made Avela's armor, click right there. First fail. Yep, happens. Needs to be fixed.